Hi guys, we are going to learn more about managed identities today, or in this video. Maybe it's another different day for you. So we were learning key vaults in the previous video. Now we are going to focus on the second section under the secure Azure solutions, managed identities. A common challenge for developers is the management of the secure credentials, certificates, and keys used to secure communication between services. Managed identities eliminate those needs. While developers can securely store secrets in Key Vault, services need a way to access Azure Key Vault. Managed identities provide an automatically managed identity in the Azure ID for applications to use when connecting resources that support Microsoft Entra Authentication. Applications can use managed identities to obtain Microsoft Entra tokens without having to manage any credentials. Yeah, imagine that there are multiple services in Azure. Azure is the platform supplied by the Microsoft itself. So if you deploy some application in there, the container can be authenticated against the other services inside the Azure, because those services are already Microsoft services, right? You just put your code inside that, and that code can call everything. And now Microsoft announced this as a managed identities feature, but yeah, I think they should give some name for it in order to make it explainable. There are two types of managed identities: system assigned, user assigned. If you create an app registration, then it means user assigned managed identity. Characteristics of managed identities. The following table highlights some of the key differences between the two types of managed identities. System assigned, user assigned. Creation. Created as a part of the resource, created as a standalone resource. This is the difference, one of the differences. If you create a resource with the managed identity in it, then that system assigned managed identity is not visible in the Azure as a resource. Lifecycle. Shared lifecycle with the Azure resource that the managed identity is created with. When the parent resource is deleted, the managed identity is deleted. Independent. Sharing across Azure resources cannot be shared. It can only be associated with a single resource. Can be shared. The same user assigned managed identity can be associated with multiple resources. Okay, this is important, but also this is very simple stuff. Anyway, I will put it in among my notes. Creation automatically within a resource, independent. Try to lifecycle, yes, cannot be shared. Exactly. Following are common use cases for managed identities. System assigned identity, workloads contained within a single Azure resource, workloads needing independent identities. Workloads contained within, yes, workloads needing independent identities. For example, an application that runs on a single virtual machine. Yeah. Workload. Okay, let's say workload is something your application is doing. Run multiple resources can share single identity workload needing for authentication to secure resources part of the provision. What Azure services support managed identities? What Azure services support managed identities? All of them, man. Managed identities for Azure resources can be used to authenticate to services that support Microsoft Entra Authentication for a list of Azure services that support. Of course, everything. Is there any service is not supported? Not sure. How a system assigned managed identity works with an Azure virtual machine. Resource Manager. Azure Resource Manager receives a request to enable system assigned managed identity on a virtual machine. Creates a service principal in Azure Entra for the identity of the virtual machine. The service principal is created in the Microsoft Entra tenant that's trusted by the subscription. Azure Resource Manager configures the identity on the virtual machine by updating the Azure Instant Metadata Service Identity endpoint. After the virtual machine has an identity, use the service principal information to grant the virtual machine access to Azure resources. To call Azure Resource Manager, use role-based access control in blah blah blah. To call Key Vault, grant your code access to the specific secret and key in the vault. Your code that's running on the virtual machine can request a token from Azure Instances Metadata Services endpoint accessible only from within the virtual machine. Exactly. A call is made to enter ID to request an access token by using the client ID and the certificate configured in step 3. Your code sends the access token. How a user assigned managed identity works with an Azure virtual machine. User assigned. Azure Resource Manager receives a request to create a user assigned managed identity. Creates the service principal and user assigned managed identity. The service principal is created in the Entra tenants trusted with the subscription. Resource Manager receives a request to configure the user assigned managed identity on the virtual machine and updates the Azure Instance Metadata. Azure Instance Metadata Service Identity endpoint with the user assigned. So the user identity is created. Use the service principal information to grant the identity access. Yeah, the same stuff. Rest is the same, okay. To create or enable Azure Virtual Machine with a system assigned managed identity, your account needs the virtual machine contributor role assignment. No other Microsoft Entra director role assignments are required. Machine contributor, virtual machine contributor. Enable system assigned managed identity during creation of an Azure virtual machine. Something like that. Azure virtual machine create. ASVM create resource group name generate SSH keys assign identity Very good. Assign identity. Role contributor. The role of the identity. Okay. Look. Virtual machine is requested by assigned identity parameter with the specified role. Exactly. And scope. My subscription. Scope is my subscription. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Contributor under the subscription. It's their commitment, yeah? And admin username, Azure user. Admin password. Yeah, why is that needed? Admin of the virtual machine. Okay. Admin user for the VM. Enable system assigned managed identity on an existing Azure virtual machine. AS VM identity assign. Is assign and Azure VM identity. Azure VM identity assign group and the name. Enable system assigned managed identity on an existing Azure virtual machine. Enable system assigned identity on an existing VM. Create a user assigned identity. Azure is that identity create. Identity create. There is also Azure role definition. Azure role assign, right? Then you assign roles. Okay. Let's continue with the identity creation. Assign a user assigned the managed identity during the creation of an Azure virtual machine. VM create virtual machine image. Admin assign identity, and then you give the user assigned one role subscription. Very good. And then assign a user assigned managed identity existing one. Yeah, while this is while creating, this is existing one. Assign ID to existing VM. Let's see some code. Python. Python. And Azure. Install the needed Azure library packages. Azure Management Resource, Azure Management Compute Network, Azure Identity. Pip install. Azure Identity, default Azure Credentials, Compute Management Client, Network Management Client, Resource Management Client, default client credentials, right? The subscription, Resource Management Clients. Create or update. Network management client. Oh man, you can do everything by coding. Manage the resources. Writing applications, huh? By writing applications. Network. You manage the network. CLI. Let's remember the package names. Azure Management Resource, Azure Management Compute, Management Network, Azure Identity. Then let's see the CLI. Azure Group Creation, Network Creation, the Resource Group, VM, yes, name. Network creation requires the group and the virtual network name, address, prefixes, starts. Subnet name, subnet prefixes. Okay, the first subnet. Network public IP create. Public IP. Okay. And this is going to be assigned to some, to the virtual machine. So here. No? Or is the probably this one then? First the IP, then IP goes into NIC, network interface, network public IP, network VNet, network public IP, network NIC. A very useful tool, and that's Azure CLI is a very useful tool. Azure VM create, then network interface, image, public IP, SQU standard, admin username, admin password, clean up resources. Very good. Next, acquire an access token. Client application can request managed identities for Azure resources app only access token for accessing a given resource. The token is based on the managed identities for Azure resources. Key vault access policy can only be used when data stored in a vault. The Azure Identity Library supports default Azure credential type, automatically attempts to authenticate via multiple mechanisms, including environment variables or an interactive sign-in. The credential type can be used in your development environment using your own credentials. It can also be used in your production Azure environment using a managed identity. No code changes are required and when you deploy your application. Default Azure credential is intended to simplify getting started with the SDK by handling common scenarios with reasonable default behaviors. Developers who want more control or whose scenario isn't served by the default settings should use other credential types. Environment, default Azure credential. The default Azure credential attempts to authenticate via the following mechanisms in this order, stopping when one succeeds. In this order. And stopping when one exceeds. Environment. Reads account information specified via environment variables and use it to authenticate. Okay. The Azure the client ID and secret maybe in the environment. Then it will first iterate it from there. Second, managed identity. If the application is deployed to an Azure host with the managed identity enabled, it looks for first the environment variables. If it doesn't find anything there, then it's using the managed identity. Yeah, if you ask me, it should try first the managed identity, but maybe there is a reason for it. The third one, Visual Studio. If developer authenticated via Visual Studio, the default Azure credential authenticates with that account. CLI, okay. PowerShell, interactive browser. If nothing is there, then interactively we'll try to get the token. Examples. Azure Identity package. This example demonstrates authenticating the secret client from keyboard secrets. Yeah, using the default Azure credentials. Default Azure credentials, then you give the keyboard URL secret client. Specify a user as assigned managed identity with. Yeah, I know that. You give the client managed identity client ID. Options. Default Azure client credentials options. Blob client and then blob client, okay. Define a custom authentication flow with chain token credentials. Well, the default Azure credential is generally the quickest way to get started deploying applications for Azure. More advanced users may want to customize the credentials considered when authenticating. Chain token credential enables users to combine multiple credential instances to define a customized chain of credentials. This example demonstrates creating chain token credential which attempts to authenticate using managed identity and fall back to authenticated via the Azure CLI if managed identity is unavailable in the current environment. The credential is then used to authenticate an event hub producer client. Okay, let's see, chained managed identity, the CLI. And it uses this credential to get the event hub clients. Very good. Which of the following managed identity characteristics is indicative of user assigned identities? Which of the following managed identity characteristics indicate of user assigned? Shared, exactly. Shared life cycle with an independent life cycle with shared other resource can be associated with single Azure resource. No. The client app requests managed identities for an access token for a given resource. Which of the following options is based? Look, you don't understand what you're doing. This is the problem, huh? You don't understand what you read. First, try to understand how. Focus. A client application. Then, when you say client application, then imagine it. Okay? there is an application requests a managed identities for an access token for a given resource. Okay, imagine there's a app. It required a managed identity to access some keyword. Which of the following options is basis for the token? Which of the following options is the basis for the token? Give me the basis of the token of service principal virtual machine. I think I would say virtual machine here. Sorry, service principal. Virtual machine, not the basis of for a token, right? Auth 2.0. I would say that. Excellent. Back to finish. Now we have also finished this part. Let's see you in the next video.